Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Several people sent me a story about a guy in New York who made one house payment and then just stayed, and they can't get him out. Long Island man dodges eviction for 20 years, living in a house he doesn't own. From the New York Post, Georgette Roberts and Kathy Ann Boniello wrote it. Jason, Edward, Ari, and Ben all sent it to me. And this is a crazy one. A Long Island man who only made one mortgage payment has used the courts to stay in the house for 23 years for free, according to all the documents filed in the various courts on this. And we heard about squatters. Squatters are when someone comes in, they just see a piece of property or house that's vacant, they just move in, and they hope that they won't get kicked out. This is different. The guy bought the house with a mortgage, made one payment, and then just stopped making payments 23 years ago. So he's filed 4 lawsuits. He's claimed bankruptcy 7 times. And that has all helped him stay in the house that he bought in 1998 for $290,000. And it's a 2,081 square foot home in East Meadow. You have to understand that the 4 lawsuits are legal actions, and the bankruptcy filings are technically also legal actions. So it's like 11 different legal actions that have allowed him to tie this up and keep them from getting him physically removed from the house. So here's what's going on. 2 different banks and a real estate company have all owned the 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath since the man was foreclosed upon in 2000. So I could do the math on that. I think it's 2021, but he's still in the house. Now, he's not the only one in the house now, and apparently this is helping convolute things a little bit. Because there's other people now who claim to live in the house as well. But if you don't know this, when someone files for bankruptcy, it puts an automatic stay on all the legal actions against them. So if somebody sues somebody, the person being sued can run to court and file a bankruptcy action, and the moment it gets filed, the lawsuits filed against them get stayed. Now, somewhere down the road, there's supposed to be hearings and things that would figure this stuff all out. But this guy's situation, along with things that we've had happen, such as the housing crisis of 2008, and of course COVID, have helped him as well. So he's not the only occupant of the house leveraging the U.S. Bankruptcy Code's automatic stay rules, because at least 3 other people now list the home as their address. So occasionally they file for bankruptcy as well in Brooklyn Federal Court. And when they do that, it grants them an automatic stay. So what happens is they'll file the action, it'll work its way through the court a little bit, and it'll get dismissed. And then apparently the people in the house just wait to see what happens next. And when someone comes along and says, hey, we want you out, they file something, they file for another bankruptcy. And the sad part is that federal courts in particular are usually pretty good about going after what they call vexatious filers. People who file just too many lawsuits for no reason. And I'm not talking about, people go, well, there's too many lawsuits in America. We're talking about there are people out there who are habitual filers. They just file lawsuits. And a lot of times they're in prison because they got nothing better to do. But there's also just people out there who just abuse the system. And a court can, if it wants to, deem somebody a vexatious filer and say this person can no longer file stuff unless they get permission from the court to do it. They've got to approach the court and go, we're going to file something. Here's why we think we can this time, even though we're not supposed to anymore. And a court can go yay or nay. So I'm not sure why that has not happened yet in this case, because it appears like this is ripe for it, as we say. An attorney who reps the current property owner says it's really a group of people that are more than willing to use the courts and abuse the courts to whatever extent they need to extend their illegal occupancy. Now, the man who's the original person who had the mortgage in the house, according to the attorney, has a history of litigation that is incredibly long and sordid. And the attorney said he's foreclosed on people before, and nothing even approaches the length of this one. He said he's not legally occupying that property. It's an outrage. And so here's the thing. The original mortgage was at 7.375% interest rate on a $232,000 adjustable rate mortgage. But by not paying the mortgage, it looks like he's saved about $440,000. $440,000 that he has not paid. The original loan was through Washington Mutual. He made one payment of $1,602. $1,000,000.37. And then he defaulted, and of course, the bank began foreclosure proceedings a year later. So about 1999, they began foreclosure proceedings. 1999. The man is still there in 2021. By May of 2000, Washington Mutual successfully foreclosed on the home, and the man was forever barred from any claim to the property according to the judgment of foreclosure. But he didn't leave. So in 2001, he filed bankruptcy. He went on to file another in 2001, twice more in 2002, and once in 2003. And many of you will know this, but you can file bankruptcy, and if it proceeds, you can only file one every so often, and it's years, not months. But it appears that he files these and just kind of like lets them wither and hopes that whoever's coming after him goes away. So when the bankruptcy filings didn't do that, the man would go to state court and seek relief, sometimes acting as his own attorney. And that's according to an August 2005 order from Judge Burton S. Joseph from Nassau County. Meanwhile, in 2004, he transferred the deed of the home to a friend, even though he had no legal right to do so, according to court papers. So if you own the property, you can sell it to somebody, you can quit claim it to them, you can do it. There's different ways in different states of transferring property to somebody. But if you don't own it, you can't transfer it. So if I try to transfer property to you that I don't own, it's an ineffective transfer. It doesn't do anything. So if you and I are standing in front of, the Brooklyn Bridge, and I say, you want to buy that bridge? You say, yes, I do. I have a piece of paper here, deed to the bridge, I sign it and I hand it to you. Nothing happened there, except I handed you a piece of paper. But he did that where he deeded the home to somebody else. So that man then also filed for bankruptcy. So people are filing for bankruptcy saying, I live in this house, I'm being chased around, I want bankruptcy protection. And underlying it all is a house that doesn't belong to the people who are filing for bankruptcy regarding it. So the judge in Nassau County, who I mentioned earlier, wrote that the man and his friends' apparent frivolous conduct in using the court system and the bankruptcy proceeding as a sword to get out of a lawful debt rather than a shield is most disconcerting to this court. And he wrote that in 2005, and he threatened them with sanctions. He said, if you keep filing this stuff, you're going to get sanctioned. That was 16 years ago, 2005. By 2008, Washington Mutual had gone under, marking one of the largest bank collapses in American history, and its assets then went over to J.P. Morgan Chase. The new bank then had to start all over trying to get this man out of the house. They've been tied up in litigation with him for years, and he has filed at least 3 lawsuits against them, again, in Nassau Supreme Court. The two sides are also in an ongoing legal battle in Brooklyn Federal Court. So there's federal court actions, state court actions, and the state court actions are in the same court where a judge said that the conduct was apparently frivolous. So the man claims in court papers that Chase committed blatant fraud in 2010 by trying to evict him when it didn't have proper title to the home, and accused the bank of withholding surplus funds from a previous auction of the property. And of course, the problem there is that he says they're wrong for trying to evict him when they don't have proper title to the home, but neither does he, according to the courts. So Chase then said that the man was clogging the court docket with patently frivolous claims. By May of 2018, Chase unloaded the property again to Diamond Ridge, which offered the man $20,000 to leave. They actually said, we'll pay you to leave. Just take the money and go away. He wouldn't take the deal. Instead, he filed for bankruptcy again in 2019 and 2020. Another purported occupant of the house filed bankruptcy 4 times in 2019, as did another resident who filed once. And the Diamond Ridge attorney said, there always seems to be a new occupant who pops up at the last moment, but they never show up in court. And one of the occupants is allegedly named John Smith. John Smith. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I know there's people named John Smith out there, but it just makes you wonder. At least one judge thinks it's time for the man to go. A district judge, Scott Fairgrieve, wrote in December 2019, the history of this case going on for approximately 20 years must come to an end. Meanwhile, Diamond Ridge has spent $150,000 on legal fees and $50,000 in property taxes. since purchasing the home, and said, as of this writing, there's no end in sight. So while the guy's been living there, not paying his mortgage, someone else is paying his property taxes because they don't want the home to go into foreclosure for property taxes. Some people in the audience will go, wait a second, Steve, that might be the way to get him out. The problem is that if they do that, the house gets auctioned and it might wind up in somebody else's possession. So the investment company bought it for whatever they bought it for. And plus, they've already got $150,000 in legal fees and another $50,000 in property taxes. So they got $200,000 into this. So I don't think they want that to happen. Meanwhile, the pandemic, maybe another extra shot this guy gets, because the COVID-19 backlog in New York's housing courts has kept them from pursuing their eviction efforts. Meanwhile, the Post attempted to contact the man to ask him about his side of the story. He did not return messages. A woman answered the door at the house and identified herself as a tenant and said that the man was not at home. But meanwhile, in the driveway were at least 3 cars with no license plates. So they just throw in that little bit of color there for you, as we say. But a whole bunch of bankruptcies, a whole bunch of lawsuits, and it looks like the bankruptcies get filed and not pursued. And so all you got to do is pay the filing fee, fill out a piece of paper, some documents, and submit it to the court, and you get the automatic stay. And again, I don't understand why somebody doesn't go to the judge and say, this is obviously a vexatious filer, and from this point forward, anything he files should be vetted by the court before it's accepted for filing. And I know some guys do bankruptcy work. I'm sure that they can weigh in on this. The question is if there's anything really that remarkably different about a bankruptcy filing where they wouldn't allow that. But it seems to me that they'd have to allow that because it's a federal court and they've got rules. Federal courts, you don't mess around with them. I know some state courts that you can get away with playing a little loose with the rules. Federal court generally no. And I know that attorneys would never get involved in something like this, filing, frivolous bankruptcy proceedings to stop an eviction for fear of losing your license. The problem is if you're not an attorney, you haven't got a license to fear losing. So it's a crazy story, but almost 21 years since the man made his last mortgage payment, and his last was his first, ironically. Made the one mortgage payment, and since then, just filing stuff in court, has managed to stay there. They've even offered him $20,000 to leave, and he's like, why should I leave? I got a free house. Someone else is paying the property taxes for me. So crazy story. Jason, Edward, Ari, and Ben, thanks for sending it. New York Post published it. Georgette Roberts and Kathy Ann Boniello wrote it. Long Island man dodges eviction for 20 years living in a house he does not own. Questions or comments, please put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
I had the right to remain silent, but I didn't have the ability.